During these first two sessions, we've defined assertiveness and distinguished it from aggression and passivity. We've spoken about how to develop assertiveness from a strategic point of view, through understanding the issues involved and through exercises you can do before taking assertive action in the everyday world. In this second session, we've been looking at tactical applications of assertiveness in contemporary business situations, and we've seen how Dale Carnegie anticipated those situations even in his earliest work. Before moving on to the sharply focused topics on assertiveness that will comprise our following sessions, let's look at some of the reactions you may get when you make assertiveness the basis of your business communications. Knowing how to recognize and deal with these reactions is extremely important. Unless you handle them correctly, you may indeed have behaved assertively while you were in the presence of the other party, but you won't get the action you desire after the conversation is completed. By far, the most common negative response to assertiveness is simple aggression by the other person. In some situations, there may be raised voices, red faces, fists pounded on the table, along with all kinds of threats and intimidation. The challenge here is to avoid being drawn into those kinds of behaviors. Assert your right to remain apart from them. If you've done your strategic work before the conversation took place, you can be sure you're in the right, so there's no need to apologize or back down. You can certainly express regret that the other person is upset, but having said that, you should then reaffirm your position. One of the most dangerous things about anger is the fact that it's so highly contagious. You need to create immunity from other people's anger by awareness of just how catching it can be. And remember, even if people don't get angry in your presence during an assertive conversation, it's a mistake to let them leave before any harsh feelings are resolved. Otherwise, you may find them expressing their anger about you to other people in the workplace instead of to your face, and that can be even more difficult to deal with. Through the grapevine, you may hear that there has been complaining and grumbling around the water cooler. At least initially, the best tactic is to ignore this fallout. If it continues, you'll want to have another conversation in which you apply the same principles of assertiveness that we've been discussing, but make bickering and backbiting the subject of your talk. This time, however, make sure that any negative feelings come to the surface before you part ways, no matter how much anger that may include on the other person's part. As we've discussed, the challenge for you is to avoid being drawn into it. Overtly aggressive behavior, whether in your presence or behind your back, is actually easier to deal with than passive-aggressive responses to an assertive conversation. Pouting, self-pity, excuse-making, and even crying are very common. Once again, be sympathetic, but don't back down. In the previous session, we introduced the tactic of simply repeating your core message over and over, quietly but firmly, no matter how much drama you may encounter. Some individuals react to assertiveness by taunting, trying to undermine your argument and position, and other such behavior. It is important to deal with those reactions immediately by pointing out what the person is doing and by affirming your position. If there are other people present, it's best to take the person aside rather than dealing with the problem in front of others. It's also possible that an individual may completely deny everything you've been saying. You can be accused of completely fabricating a problem where none actually exists. This can be difficult because you're talking about two opposing interpretations of reality, and the other person may sincerely believe that you're completely mistaken. Here it's appropriate to apologize for any possible error on your part, but only in a hypothetical way. Your response should probably sound something like this. I've told you how things look to me. If I'm wrong, I'm sorry. But if my perceptions were accurate, I need to stand by what I said. If the issue you've been discussing was sensitive enough, you may even encounter someone who complains of a health-related symptom, feeling faint, for example, or shortness of breath, or a sudden headache. This doesn't happen often, but when you're really asking people to change their behavior, you should be prepared for surprises of all kinds. There's no doubt, however, that in today's workplace you must take any physical complaints very seriously, especially if you're in a managerial position. The legal issues are so delicate that you must offer medical assistance whenever anyone mentions a physical problem. There's probably nothing seriously wrong, but there's always the chance that something really is. In any case, you'll be protecting yourself from possible legal action. So far, we've talked about people who defend themselves against your assertive interventions. That defense may take the form of direct aggression against you, subversive behavior behind your back, or passive-aggressive acting out. But on the other end of the spectrum, there are people who not only seem to agree with you, but who can't seem to stop apologizing. This can be a very effective form of interpersonal jujitsu, unless you know how to deal with it. The best response is to quietly say that apologies are not really necessary, or at least not more than once. Then reassert the appropriateness and fairness of what you've already said. If you keep these tactical responses in mind, you'll find that your assertive behavior will bring you the best possible results. Of course, others may find it surprising or even shocking at the outset, especially if you're not known for asserting yourself in the past.